I wasn't going to say this, but I will now. Thank you for introducing me. But can you imagine if I was your teacher, I was your professor, and this is the first time you have a lesson with me. And every year, the professors, the teachers say to the students, my name's Colin, blah, 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 blah. Oh. And after a while, you get very bored of telling people, and you only manage to get a small portion of what you think is interesting out. And so, just recently, I've decided to change the tactics. So when I run masterclasses for teachers and lecturers, I say to them, okay, you can work in groups, but you can only have 3 questions per group that you can ask me. You can ask me anything, but I reserve the right not to answer it. And I'll give you a tip. If you ask boring questions, you'll get boring answers. If you ask interesting questions, and you see the groups, and they're talking away, and they keep taking a look at me. You know, they have to look at you to imagine what they want to know. But of course, the great thing about that is it changes the power. Because suddenly, the students, the teachers, the lecturers, they're asking me questions. You flip the power from day one. But also you start to train them in the art of asking questions. To me, that's a far better experiential way of introducing yourself. And then we flip it, and the students say something about themselves, or the teachers say something about themselves. I wasn't even going to say that today. But I just thought, yeah, introductions, very difficult to introduce people. This picture was taken in Greece, and Eva said, where have you been in Greece? And I said, well, I went to this fabulous conference a few years ago, but I can't remember where it was. And I must find out. But I've been to Greece many times, and these people on this course were from across Europe, and it was an experiential education program, and it was fantastic. I can still remember eating my breakfast one morning and seeing dolphins out at sea. Wonderful. So, let's try a bit more technology. So I'm a professor, but I also run my own business. I work 4 days a week in the university. And it's always intrigued me that in higher education, we are expected to write papers, but we give away all our intellectual property. Whereas if we write books on the left-hand side, we get paid. But the books are not valued very much, but these are. Intriguing, isn't it? Absolutely intriguing. We give away intellectual property. This is the latest book. This is out in August. This is Experiential Learning, the 4th edition. So I'm looking forward to that coming out. It's taken me quite a while to revisit it. And some of the themes in the book I'll talk about in a minute. So this is what I want to cover. You probably know that we're well and truly in the middle of an experience economy. Everywhere, everybody's talking about experience. The patient experience in hospitals, the dining experience, the shopping experience. Everything's to do with experience. And within that context, experiential education is changing direction. So I want to look at some 21st century issues and the broadening of education. And then I want to focus in the second half of this session on some experiential ways to help people to learn using what we know about the brain and the body. So this is what I want to cover, just to give you a quick sketch. So here we are, the experience economy. Travel around the world, take some pictures, and here it is. That's in the Canary Islands, talking about experience. This is experience luxury. This is Singapore, the dining experience. This is in a hotel, the premium experience, the gourmet experience. This is
Gran Canaria a couple of weeks ago, the 5 senses experience of the spa of the hotel. Everybody's talking about experience, and this is one of the key texts. 1999, there were a couple of texts came out, the experience economy and experiential marketing. So people are selling experiences, and we'll have a look at a kid's experience in a minute that is out there in the market. So experiential education is shifting. The student voice is getting stronger in universities, in schools. Student participation in the whole operation of organizations is increasing. But the question is, what is experiential education? What is it? Well, essentially, in experiential forms of education, experiential learning, experiential education, the experience is the most important bit. And the design of those experiences is what teachers and lecturers are increasingly having to do. We are no longer doing what I'm doing now, which is just talking to people. This is not what education's all about. So teachers and lecturers are becoming architects of experiences, but those experiences are for learning, but also we need to know the experience of learning. How do people learn? And that's where teachers and lecturers are very good, because we know about how people learn, or we should do. So, this is interesting. I'll just get you to do a little activity in a minute. But first of all, I want to tell you that I was involved in running an executive program out in Nairobi. And they took us out on the African plains. And you might not know, but I'm a zoologist originally. I trained as a zoologist. So there we were on the African plains with our binoculars, and right in the distance, I could see these giraffe walking across the plains, and it was all hazy because it was hot. This is my daughter in a safari park with the head of the giraffe inside the car. So why would you want to go all the way to Africa to see the giraffe at a distance when it can stick its head inside your car? And you can touch the giraffe. You can smell the urine. And I always say to the men in the room, if you ever met a woman with eyes like that, you would marry her straight away. And my daughter had some feed, you know, the food for the giraffe. And this great big tongue came out and licked the food off her hand. And she said, "Oh, Dad." I said, "Don't wipe it down the car seat." Now that's what I call an experience of a giraffe. It touches you. So let's try something now. I want you to turn to somebody next to you. Yeah? You can do a demonstration for me. And I want you to put your hands side by side with your fingers nearly touching, but not yet. Try it. So, yeah. Not touching yet. So, try this. When you touch somebody's fingers, see what happens. You not only feel their fingers, but you can feel your own fingers. Is that right? Try it again, take them apart. Can you feel your fingers now? No. Not really, but when you touch somebody else's fingers, you can feel your own fingers. Your fingers come alive by interacting with other fingers. In a way, that's what experiential learning is all about. You come alive through the experience. Okay. Let's try this. If I said to you, Did you know that these days, and especially as plastics are in the news a lot at the moment, but I guess you know that we can make trousers, jackets, all sorts of things from plastic bottles. Now, is that exciting? Not really. But if I said to you, this is an outdoor jacket made from plastic bottles, is it getting a bit more interesting? And wait a minute, if I come down into the audience and say, feel this, that's made from plastic bottles, genuinely made from plastic bottles. Genuinely made. Feel that. Made from plastic bottles. Watch this. I've almost created a desire to touch it. And actually what I'm saying here is you can just talk, you can show, and you can let people touch it. They're three different experiences, aren't they? Fundamentally very different experiences, made from plastic bottles. Incredibly soft, unbelievably soft. Patagonia made this. They were so mean, they only sent me a little square like that. So we could wear it out. So, yeah. We need to think about the experience of learning, because there are many ways we can get information across these days, many, many different ways. So, I've just written a paper which is all about designing experience, and I've called it, in the paper I've talked about learning experience design, and it just so happens that the initials are LED. Now, in English, that means it's a light bulb. It's the new low-energy light bulb, LED. So I want you to imagine that it's time to throw away the old light bulbs and get the special LED bulbs in your teaching. Why? Because the new bulbs last longer, the new bulbs are brighter, the new bulbs use less energy. And translated, that means as teachers, using less energy means you're not going to be exhausted because you're not going to be teaching as much. Yeah? Brighter means more memorable, and so on and so on. So that's the message for me, is we need to start thinking about how we design experiences that are powerful for people to learn. In Singapore, I've been to Singapore about 30 times, and I work a lot in Singapore, and I've worked with the Ministry of Education. And I'll show you in a minute some of the things that they're doing, but we're beginning to see this phenomenon not just of lifelong learning, but of life-wide learning. So we're widening it as well as lengthening it. We expect people to learn for longer, but also there's the inside and outside of the school. There's a whole world out there. So this particular guy has written this book on life-wide learning. And I have to tell you something interesting, but I lost this book. I had a copy of this book, and it was signed by the author, Professor Norman Jackson, and I lost it. And I searched everywhere for it, so I went onto Amazon, and I decided, just pay for another one. So I paid £21, and it arrived, and guess what it said inside the book? Best wishes, Colin, from Norman. I bought it as a second-hand book, and it was mine. I paid £21 for my own book, and then I handed it into the hands of Amazon. Yeah. So, the same in higher education. Students are doing a lot of things outside of university. And now in Singapore, I'll come on to Singapore in a minute. Let me just talk about this bit first. Let's just take another fresh look at experience. So what do we mean by experience? Well, what I would say is when you teach, I don't know about you, but you look at the people you're teaching and you have no idea what's going on in their heads. Is that right? It's a private world. It's an inner world and it's private. And then there's a public world. There's a world out here. We can dim the lights. We can turn the sound up. We can do all sorts of things as teachers. So I think it's important, these two metaphors. Everybody has their own inner world life and experience, and nobody in this room has the same film. You write your own script, you put your own film together, and that's your life. But in the outer world, the metaphor here is a river, because you can choose to put your foot in the river and experience it, but you can never put your foot in the same water twice. When the experience is gone, it won't happen exactly the same again. So they're two useful metaphors. Your film, your script, you decide, you write it, you put the clips together, that's your life. So they're useful metaphors because they're very easy to remember. So let me just show you something that's commercial. How many people in the room have heard of Kidzania? No? The global director of Kidzania requested to link with me on LinkedIn. And he said, how often are you in London? And I said, well, not very often. He said, well, I'll come and see you in Sheffield. So I sent him a long email. The university is opposite the Novotel, we're on this road, we're blah, 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 and it was a long, long email. I'll meet you in level 5, in the cafe, in the cutting edge, blah, 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 blah. And he sent me an email back saying, I know, I live in Sheffield. And he flies all over the world, and he's the educational director for this. If you haven't seen it, it's quite amazing. And it's from Mexico originally. There's one in London, there's one in Kuala Lumpur, there may be one in Athens, there's one in Chile, where I'm going in Santiago, I'm going there in a couple of weeks. And it's like a giant shopping mall for children. And they experience jobs. And it's said that young children, very young children, start to open their minds about the kind of careers that they might want to take up. When they check in, if it's in London, it's sponsored by British Airways. If it's in Malaysia, it's sponsored by Air Asia. And they get a passport, a Kidzania passport. And they get money. And when they've spent their money, they have to go to work and earn some more. So would you like to see a little film clip of some kids in this shopping mall? So remember, we're in the experience economy. Remember, we're teachers. And remember, this is what's going on out there in the big wide world, and if we don't take notice, these kids are going to get even more bored with education if we're not careful. This is exciting. I have my criticisms of it, but I also think it's a sign of what's... Oh, no. Oh, no. Just give me 2 seconds. For some reason, the hyperlink in setting this up has not connected properly, and it should do. Let's try it again. We'll try it now. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, wait a minute. Might be going. No. Let's try plan B. There's always a plan B. There's always a plan B.
Female pilots. I've been to America, Spain, and I love every minute of it. Air traffic control has cleared us for takeoff. Okay, let's go. People, property, and postcodes. I call it the 3 Ps. Hello, Mrs. Smith, how can I help you? I have won lots of awards. When I was a school child, I was directing my school play. It's not a job, it's a calling. A Romeo. A Romeo. We see surgery as an art form. It's vital to keep a cool head. Scalpel. I'm a bit of a petrol head. I could have been a doctor, but I prefer cars. What's not to love?
And we are live in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, and welcome to the 9 o'clock news.
Kidzania, London, a city made just for kids aged 4 to 14.
Okay, well, I just set the PowerPoint up. Just have a little talk to your neighbours. Would you like to go to that? What do you think to that? Just have a little talk. Go on, just say, what do you think to that? I need to hear some noise. So, Kidzania, they're doing, all the kids have a security tag on them when they go in, and they're doing a lot of research. And they're doing a lot of research on gender, for example. So they find that if they put women in the pit stop where the Formula 1 car is, a lot more girls will go and have a go at being a Formula 1 engineer. So what they're finding is kids' horizons can be quite narrowed, especially when they come from certain areas. So this research is fascinating, but I think the concept is interesting. I worry about the commercialization, but isn't it interesting? They claim that it's experiential learning at its best. There's a school in near Sheffield where I work, and it's a US idea that they've adopted, and it's called Expeditionary School. And the children, on their first day at school, they don't even go into school. They get on a coach, and they go to the Welsh coast and the mountains, and they go out to sea, and they learn all about being a crew member, not a passenger. So they enter school with the idea that the teachers and themselves are all running the ship. Nobody is a passenger. And it's based on this interesting book, with children as leaders of their own learning, children taking responsibility. They have to present their work to their parents on special evenings. They have big portfolios, and they adopt a whole different approach to learning, and they do it by addressing a major question. And through addressing these questions, they cover the school curriculum, the national curriculum. One question might be, what is it to be a human being? Fascinating. And by answering that question, they do maths, they do geography, they do history, but they take a lot of responsibility for answering those kind of questions. So if you want to have a look at that, Ron Berger, Leaders of Their Own Learning. Now, back to Singapore. Singapore is taking, is using experiential learning as a co-curricular approach to education. Now, what do they mean by that? Well, you can work it out by saying, we have things called extracurricular. What kind of things would be extracurricular? Sport, yeah, what they call uniform groups, the scouts, the guides, whatever, they have traditionally been extracurricular. Running events, music events have all been extracurricular. Not any longer in Singapore. They've gone right into the heart of the curriculum, and the reason for that is because they want to adopt a more holistic approach to education. So they're calling it a co-curricular approach. And Singapore want their children to be this: confident, self-aware, self-directed, a concerned citizen, and so on, and so on, and so on. And you can find these things on the website, 21st Century Competencies. And when you look back in history, you see these rather interesting developments. And of course, on the right is the bringing in of the extracurricular. Sport is at school, but things like uniform groups are traditionally not. The running of events, traditionally not. And the 3 T's at the bottom of this screen are quite helpful to look at the way or the direction that education is changing. On the left, we have transmission approach, which is actually what I'm doing right now. It's a simple transmission, which is not really that effective. Transactional dynamics in the center 2 pictures, and really putting all of that together, not eliminating any of it, we have the possibility of, with this co-curricular approach, to transform young people's lives. Now, if you look at those words at the top, you'll see that that's an ambitious education approach. And this is why they asked me to come and talk to them, because it mirrors my own model of learning. And this is my model of learning. And again, I would ask you, is this what you would like your children to have in their education? Would you like them to learn to think? Of course you would. Would you like them to learn to feel? An emotionally intelligent being? Yes, of course you would. Would you like them to learn to belong? To be a citizen of Greece? To belong to the local community? And so on. Yes, of course you would. So the model here is a 7-dimensional model of the human experience. If you want a copy of things like this, you can always email me, and I can send you a model. This particular model is the same thing, but it's a more mechanistic model. Now, if I show you this picture, it means nothing to you and you won't remember it. But actually on the right there, people are constructing the model with cards and rope and so on and so on. And I guarantee that people will remember that model the next day, the next month, the next year. Whereas if I just showed them and told them, they wouldn't remember. So there it is. This is the Singapore 21st century competency model on the left. And there's my own model on the right. And I've actually just mapped out some of the requirements in the 21st century model and put them underneath my own 7-dimensional human model. And that's what they want in the young people of Singapore. Concerned citizen, active contributor, confident person, self-directed learner, and so on. Now, what I want to do now is just to say there are many underpinning ideas behind experiential learning and experiential education. But the one that I want to talk about tonight is the notion of making learning visible. Okay? Making learning visible and helping young people to navigate complicated things. We were talking about human speech today. Now, the problem with speech, just let me check this out. Is there anybody in this room that can say more than one word at a time? Put your hand up if you can. Anybody? That means then, just, am I right in saying this, that when we speak, and I'm speaking now, the words are coming out one at a time, like a piece of string. So how do you explain complicated things with a piece of string? So no wonder the children are doing what you're doing, which is nodding, but actually inside their head they're saying, what on earth is he talking about? What on earth is she talking about? I don't know. The problem with speech is it tries to create a picture in the human brain through a linear format, but we're trying to teach complicated things. So we're stuck. The same with PowerPoint. The slides go like this, one after the other. So somebody invented Prezzo.
That's why we create stories.
Yeah. So, and we tell stories. Human speech is wonderful, don't get me wrong, but I want you to recognize that it has limitations. So how do we get over this? This is something that is popular all over the world now, and it's derived from the London Underground map. Is there a map like this anywhere in Greece? I suspect there'll be loads of them. Certainly probably in Athens. They're in Singapore, they're in Malaysia, they're in Chile, they're in Washington. And why is it so successful? Because it's a complete lie The London Underground map doesn't look like, the reality is London doesn't look like this, but somebody's straightened the lines, made them colourful, and put little circles for the stations. And you arrive in London and say, yep, I need the blue train, it's not blue, and I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stops, and I get off, and it's easy. It's the same for learning. We need simple navigational tools to help the human brain understand complex things. If you gave people in London or Athens the map on the left and said, this is how to find your way around, there will be chaos. So this is the truth, this is a lie, but this is simplified, and as people get more experienced, they can read that map. But they need to start here. If you don't know London, if you don't know Athens, you need to start somewhere where it's simple. So how do we do this? These people that you see on the picture, I'll just explain what they're doing now. This is on an executive MBA, and I tip out over 100 items on a table, and they have to make sense of them. There's a solar-powered rucksack made from plastic bottles. There's all sorts of materials in the marketplace. And some of them are artistic, some of them are technological. And this is what we do. So I live in Sheffield, and Sheffield is famous for climbing. And if you know anything about climbing, for safety reasons, they have to, what do they have to do with their rope for safety reasons? They have to throw it away after a period of time. So this woman in Sheffield has bought herself a sewing machine because she realizes that hundreds of ropes are being thrown away. And what she does is she makes handbags, belts, by taking the surface of the rope, stripping the middle out, and sewing them together. Yeah? Very clever. But there are hundreds of these in there. There are hundreds of technological items, and this is what we do. We ask people to say, from old rope has been made a belt. And as they begin to work their way through these things, they begin to get patterns and learn much more complicated things. So I don't tell them, they find out for themselves, they figure things out, and they start to see very, very complex patterns. So the arrows are crucial. It seems simple, but the arrows start to develop interesting patterns. On the right there is a woman looking at a belt that's been made from an old bicycle tire. These are some patterns that MBA students have made. A plastic bottle can be made into cups, there's the fleece that you've just felt, can be made into that. And so they develop radial patterns. Have you noticed that this is a washing up brush, but in Scandinavian countries, in fact a woman from Finland gave me that. Here, very clever, what's going on here? There you throw the whole thing away. Here, you only throw that bit away. And if you go back, there you throw the whole razor away, and this is an old-fashioned men's razor that's making a comeback. There you only throw the blade away. Now, believe it or not, the conversations that take place when people look at these patterns, amazing. Amazing how they start to see conceptually what's going on. Environmental innovation comes from things like this. So we also give them a code, and the code is HDOAC. Handle them, try and figure out what they are, discuss, organize them spatially. So handle, discuss, organize, analyze your organization, and then conceptualize. And do you know what that code is? It's Bloom's taxonomy. Made simple. Arrows and Bloom's taxonomy made simple, and it's amazing what people can find out. And of course, what do you think I'm doing while all this is happening? Nothing. Nothing. For 3 days, I regularly work with lecturers in Malaysia's top universities. And when I start on day one, I say to them, watch me. I'm being paid to come and work with you. And at the end of the 3 days, I want you to tell me what I've been doing. And what do you think the answer is? Very little. They're doing all the work. They're doing all the learning. Where's my hard work? My hard work is in the design of the experience, the supplying of the arrows and the handouts and the materials. But even then, we don't have to do that. We can get the students to do it. So, how is it that these things are so popular? Why are post-it labels so popular? Because they can be moved. And when they can be moved, they can be organized. So a lot of thinking in the human brain is about spatial organization. And in fact, I often refer to the human brain as having its own natural GPS system. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in I think, a couple of slides. So we do have a tendency to categorize and organize everything. And I think that's why post-it labels are so popular. This is in Washington, D.C. Museum. Look how layout gives a sense of time. And this is why in our language, and obviously I can only say this for the English language, but what you find is that when the words come out one at a time, they will also come out with words that create in the brain spatial ideas. So your mother or your father will say to you, you need to put that behind you. Yeah? Or you have your whole life in front of you. And so every now and then these really important spatial words come out because the brain makes a pattern, if you like, or a picture. Our language is full of them. We rush the bill through Parliament. I feel down about work. So, spatial dynamics are so important to learning. The human GPS system is often forgotten. It's one of the senses that's really important.
I show 8 Howard marks in the district, sorting by race and age.
Under license registration. See if I can capture an address here.
Running out of time. I was thinking maybe I'd play hooky, stay home today.
You're working too much anymore.
Can you grab that?
Sinclair.
I got 6 licenses. Where do you want them?
Over here, please.
This is what your children and your university students are going to be doing very soon.
Very slow.
Got them in the foxhole.
But we haven't got time to look at a film. Would you believe it? If you go back in time, oops. If I show you this. This is the Liverpool War Museum. Isn't it incredible? The war against Germany. We had highly intelligent commanders pushing little wooden tanks and ships and things around on a board. Why? Because they knew that speech was unreliable. Isn't that interesting? So we see in the Minority Report, we see here the technology that's going to be coming into our universities and classrooms, like the Minority Report. And what I can say to you is this. Before language, we refer to that period as the pre-linguistic, but in fact, what happened before language was movement and gestures. This was the pre-linguistic period when the brain and the body they were working together very well. And I think it's not by coincidence that we call these things gesture-based technologies. So actually movement is coming back in to work with the brain in developing patterns and information. So there it is. It's happening. The brain and the body coming back into sync. Children, young people, adults learn well by movement, by walking through things. And here, this is medical students, I'm sure you've seen it. They don't need necessarily to have a real human body anymore. They can take your heart out, they can pull your brain out, they can twist it round, and it's all virtual reality. But the good news is, it's about human bodily movement alongside learning in the brain and memory systems. So this is fundamentally quite important, the human GPS system, the linking of the brain and the body. So this is my advice. Stop teaching. Stop doing what I'm doing now, because it doesn't work very well. Let the students do the work. Don't be cynical. It works. You will engage the students when they do the work. You are then free to be their guide, their coach, their facilitator, their navigator. So this is an example of a master's level, but it can apply at any level. These, would you believe it, are all the materials that the students have developed in a study of the evolution of the global environmental movement. And all these little cards here, the blue ones are to do with the laws, the legislation, the green ones are to do with designated sites, and so on and so on. They all had to produce booklets. Organizations like Greenpeace, they produced a one-page fact sheet. Organizations like Friends of the Earth, they produce a one-page, and what do? They hand it in to me, I staple it all together, and they get a booklet back. Everybody brings one, you get 50. The next year, I ask you to do a sheet on something else. So I've got another booklet, and over 5 years, I've got 5 booklets. I've got an electronic database with 500 years worth of data. And who's done all the work? The students. Let the students do the work. They love it, and they don't get bored sitting on their bottoms like you're doing right now. Let the students do the work. It's fantastic. So here we have the notion of inheritance. Last year's students produced this booklet, you inherit it, but you have to do a new booklet this year. You're this year's students, yeah? So, and what they do is, going back to the London Underground map, all these things here go on the floor and they walk it and talk it. So they walk through the history with all their cards that they made. They actually map them all out. And this is the 1800s. And over there by the door is today. And all the coloured cards, they walk through the legislation and they talk it and they record it and they put it on the virtual learning environment. Fantastic. Multiple narratives. There is no answer. At master's level, you know there's no answer. It's a very complex dynamic. But what a wonderful way to learn it. That final, almost like a vibe of this Steve might be, for example, talking about the evolution of the voluntary movement. Fantastic. Let the students do the work. And this is exactly what I've done. If you didn't realize it, when they come to walk their talk, they put all of these things on the floor, and different groups of students will navigate through the journey. The evolution of legislation might be the blue line. The evolution of, what a fantastic way to teach it. And I have the proof and the evidence to say it works a dream. I'm a National Teaching Fellow in Britain. The government gave me £50,000 as a reward. Wow. Yeah, it's nice. And I didn't do anything. They did all the work. This is what I say to students when they're writing an essay on racism. Let's look at this image. How many points of view are there on that line? It's a black and white issue. No, it isn't. How many points of view are there on the triangle? 3. So we move from 2 points to 3 points of view. How many on the square? 4. How many on the circle? Loads. But actually, racism is this. It's complex. And if you hand your essay in to me, and it's that, you're going to fail. And you know, students remember this, easy peasy. They know that Colin's looking for this. But they need to build their journey like this. So learning is very complex. It's being changed by neuroscience. It's being changed by a more holistic approach. We've got life-wide learning. So I'll finish off tonight by saying these pictures are quite old, and the one on the right here is Turku Polytechnic in Finland. And a woman who was a senior executive in Nokia fought very hard to get a hammock lecture theatre. A hammock lecture theatre. Whoa, that's that. This is a university where they teach outdoor education in yurts with wood-burning stoves inside. This is also in Finland. Notice mobility. The tables have got wheels, the chairs have got wheels, everything is mobile. Everything is mobile. The information is mobile, post-it labels, yeah. The desks are all mobile. So we're beginning to see this amazing spatial ecology. I run a session, again, because I like to earn money by doing nothing. When I'm working with corporate executives, at 11 o'clock every day, I have a session called Coffee and Papers. And do you know what they do? The hard work is I lay out a whole table. These are senior NHS, these are senior NHS officials, managers, senior executives. And I lay out all of these papers for them to read. And they go and find a place. This woman is in India, in the Regency Hyatt Hotel. Feet up, shoes off. One woman was in a hotel once in London, log fire, shoes off, and she sat with her foot on this stool. She got coffee, croissants, and strawberries dipped in chocolate. And I said, where did you get those from? She said, oh, the people in the cafe gave them to me. And she's reading on her own. And I said to her, is it right? We say students don't read these days. Because they're always... Well, let me tell you this. Neither do senior executives in organisations. Because this woman turned around to me, and this is exactly what she said. Coffee, croissant, strawberries dipped in chocolate, and a paper on organisational development. Colin, I'm in heaven. So I give her permission to read for 45 minutes, and then all the women come together and they have a conversation about what they've read. And you say, oh, I read this article, it's really interesting. And you say, I read this article, it's a bit complicated, but I love this bit. And you know what happens? They say, oh, Colin, will you photocopy them all for us all? They have a huge lift in their learning because they've all read something different. They all contribute and have a collective discussion. It's called Coffee and Papers, and I do absolutely nothing. In fact, those women were doing that course in London Zoo, and because I'm a zoologist, you know what I did? I went to talk to the gorillas while they were doing the work. It's the experience, isn't it? It's the Coffee and Papers experience. And they loved it. And they go away and they read. These women actually went away and won an award because they changed their organisational spatial ecology. This person, this is just to prove that I don't do any work. This is my hammock. So I lived in the Amazon rainforest when I was 22 years old. I lived in the Amazon jungle. And this is a lightweight version of my hammock that I had in the Amazon. I've still got my original hammock. And I take it to Hong Kong, and while all the people in Hong Kong are working, what am I doing? Nothing. I'm lying in my hammock, thinking about what next, what I need to change, what I need to, and I'm just thinking. And I'm in my hammock. Anyway, all these pictures here are people experiencing all over the world. That's Shenzhen, that's in India, that's in Hong Kong, that's somewhere in Shanghai in China. Basically, this person was doing Coffee and Papers, and I went to go in my hammock. Can you figure out what happened? They got in my hammock to read the Coffee and Papers that they were giving. They stole my hammock. And all I could see was this pair of socks and an article in my hammock without my permission. I just thought that was smart. You know, let's get in Colin's hammock and read the papers. So this is all about letting the students do the work. Design an experience that engages them, that's powerful, and you're free to facilitate, you're free to think, you're free to design. This is the way it's going to go. So John Dewey said that designing learning experiences is not easy. It's not. If you think that actually doing nothing, I'm only joking. If you think that it's all about doing nothing, it's not. The amount of work that I put in before going to Hong Kong, before going to Malaysia, is amazing. But then I'm free to orchestrate, to navigate, to support, to help. And that's what we need more of. So it's about designing an experience for learning, which is what Kidzania is in a way, but we're teachers, so we add to that an understanding of the design of learning, the human GPS system, the brain and the body, the neuroscience, all that we know about learning has to go with it. So these are some of the people on my masterclasses. The masterclass is nothing like me standing here at the front. You do all the work, obviously. And unfortunately, this guy came on my course in Shenzhen in China, and after 3 days, he was exhausted. And I found him in this field with a flip chart sheet over his head, fast asleep. So there we are. That's the end. Now, there's only so much I can cover, but if anybody wants to ask any questions, I'm sure we've got a few minutes, maybe, if anybody wants to ask any questions. Do you like the idea of not doing much? Yeah. Work on it. Work on it.
Yeah, but this was not the truth, because the work you
Yeah.
do precedes the work you don't do.
Yeah. So when I said I don't introduce myself, you can see the philosophy. If you always introduce yourself, don't. Let the students do it. Has anybody got an interesting question that you'd like to ask me about my life?
Mostly in preschools, and mostly in preschools.
Yes. I think teachers of very young children are naturally very good at designing experiences for children. When they get to secondary school, if there's anybody here, a secondary school teacher, it seems to fade. And when we get to higher education, it had faded, but now it's changing. A lot of the lecturers around the world are starting to design very interesting experiences, problem-based learning, etc., active learning. It's all under different labels, but a lot of it is about the students doing the work in an interesting way to solve a problem, to whatever. So, yeah, it's not new. Experiential learning is not new. It's got a long history in Greek history and in Chinese philosophy and history. You know, the Confucian philosophy.
Also are based on experience.
Yeah.
No, that was just a statement. I'm not sure about the percentage that our Greek educators are using this kind of method, which is very well known, as you said, from the ancient history. Ancient Greek history.
Yeah. I think if anybody in this room is going home exhausted from teaching,
that means that we don't
it's
use
a warning sign. You're doing all the work. A bit like me now. If I kept doing an hour of this and an hour of this in university, I'd be exhausted.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say if you're teaching medieval history, this is the way to do it.
Let the students research, which is what they did here. Let the students put a chronological, colour-coded London Underground map together, and they walk it. I teach customer service, which is a very simple thing, to corporate clients. And this is what we do. We look at a critical incident where I was served last on Lufthansa business class, £2,000 ticket. And on both occasions they said, no, we haven't got anything left. Like, we don't have what you want. And then we look at customer service and people imagine they work for Lufthansa. How are they going to solve this problem with Mr. Beard? Because he's obviously not happy. And we do all this stuff. But eventually, all the groups, they put out their answers in cards. And they're only allowed up to 5 steps to solve the problem. But actually, there's a common pattern, and we all walk it together, and it goes something like this. And see if you remember it tomorrow morning when you wake up. Step 1. As a man, I think I got this advice from my wife. You always deal with the emotions first. So step 1, deal with the emotions. If Mr. Beard's upset, you have to deal with the upset, not the facts. But step 2 is establish the facts from the customer. Step 3 is you move towards a solution. Step 4 is you follow up. Would you like another glass of champagne, Mr. Beard? And then you also write a report, which you know that's what they do on a plane. So let's just do that again. Now you're sat on in a seat, hard to remember it. But if you're down here and you're walking it, tomorrow you remember it. What's step 1? Deal with the emotions. What's step 2? What's step 3? Move to a solution. Step 4, follow up with the customer, follow up. But that bodily walking, if you can imagine doing that on a grand scale, the history of, the memory embedding, because it's sensory, it's oral, it's bodily, and so it's got a huge impact on the brain in terms of remembering it. It's the LED light bulb. It's memorable, it's less exhausting for me because they're walking through it, and I'm just recording them and guiding them. Fabulous way to learn. But that doesn't mean to say you don't stop teaching. You might teach for a bit here and a bit there. It's strategic. And then you get them to go and research this, and then you staple all their whatever, or they put it on a GLE. But the culmination is you expect them to walk that history of talking. And they might specialize in a certain area. Does that give you a clue? Yes, thank you. So you sit down and say, and this is my advice, you cannot do this for everything right now. Designing powerful learning is time consuming, it's very creative, and you've got to start steadily. So you introduce something this year, you introduce something next year, and maybe 3 or 4 years time you have the dream of the students learning at a high level, being able to articulate it, being able to write about it, remembering it for exams, and having that experience with you as being the best thing they've had all year. Isn't it nice when you get that? I said to you, it's the best module I've had all year. Wonderful.
Okay, we have a question there.
Or we have the fear that the children will start to think like grown-ups. is there something, do we have results about that, that the children won't be grown-ups so little in that age that is very, very essential and very important for them. They don't have the knowledge to deal with the facts they know and they learn.
I think obviously you have to modify it according to the age group and the design. It's got to be sympathetic to that level. And we start with simplicity and we build complexity, as I showed on. Start with very simple things, very simple steps in the history. And then you start to add more and more and make it more complex. Just start simple. We all have to start simple.
Okay.
But make it engaging and then do the work. These principles apply right the way through, I think, many age groups.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question. If there is no question, I have a question. Where? Oh, παρακαλώ.
Professor, I'm wondering, is there a special part of the cognitive psychology connected with the theory of experimental learning? Which part of cognitive psychology?
Yes, but not just cognitive psychology. The whole neuroscience, you know, the more you research it, and the more you realize that there's a lot of underpinning thinking behind it. And learning is so holistic.
Στο τέλος θα μας φύγουν όλοι. Το κλείσουμε τώρα. Δεν θα το κάνουμε την ερώτηση. Γιατί άμα το κάνουμε την ερώτηση, δεν θα τελειώσουμε ποτέ. Το κάνω μετά. Ναι. Ναι, το. Σειρά σου, να σηκωθείς σηκώ πάνω. Κλείς το. Μην τον ανεβάζεις πάνω εδώ. It's okay.
Professor Beard, thank you very much for your exciting lecture and your guidance in the world of experiential education and learning. Thank you very much.